Hi, friends. Welcome again to another episode of Beyond the Clouds, Edge to Edge Transformation. And speaking of transformation, there's transformation of every kind when with and without technology. So I got to know Shri during the early days of the dot-com space when their company was acquired by Intel. But I've also gotten to know him on and off in different ways, his work in charities and now in venture capital. Shri, tell us about your journey. How did you end up doing all these things? And where are you now?
Well, thank you, Shankar. It's a pleasure to have known you through my journey, and it's been good work. That work you did also is equally important, not just the storytelling, but including when you and I engaged for a charity event as well. Um, as many of us, from Indian community, we migrated originally. Our family migrated because of the economic reason, and we were lucky enough to be getting education in India and then continued education in the U.S. So I attribute a lot of our successes collectively, all of us, because of the education we went through and emphasis on education. As part of the journey, because first and foremost, we came here for economic reason as a family. You want to succeed some shape or form compared to where you came from. And that drove the drive to do something from a financial reason point of view. And more importantly, I think we all got lucky break. Technology became important in the world, where when you and I first met, the technology was less than 3% or 4% of the GDP, and now it represents 22 to 25% of the GDP. So we all have benefited from that, and we were lucky in that sense, being at the right place at the right time. But the drive, was that we are here to do something, not just to make a living.
How did you get into entrepreneurship in the first place? And then into social entrepreneurship?
As you know, a little bit of the background, we come from a Sindhi family. As many who lived in India probably know, the Sindhi families pretty much like to work for themselves from a work point of view. So that was inherent in for us, that someday we'll be doing businesses of our own. But one other thing that our parents taught us, because they were not educated in the early days, they forced us to study, forced us to go get educated, and kind of told you that, hey, the entrepreneurship will come natural to you. Do the hard work first, and you'll be able to figure out how to do that. So that was one. Second is I've been lucky enough to work in the US. I worked in Singapore. I worked in Europe for multiple countries, in multiple countries for large multinationals as well. And ultimately, you're working for a large company, the politics gets in the way and your creativity gets stifled. Not always, but most of the time. And since you're highly motivated, highly driven, eventually you have to have your own show. And that's what got me started into entrepreneurship with the technology. And along the way, you get lucky, you get a lot of your fellow team members or founders who have the same aspiration, and you join hands to go create a company. So I've been fortunate enough for having done multiple companies. And over time, it was time to do in parallel, as well as after that, to do something both socially as well as to see how do we help other young entrepreneurs.
And you said you worked in many countries. Was that in some way a useful experience when you got into your own businesses and startup companies?
Yeah, it's a good point. So although, I believe that I had planned my life much better, but life happens to all of us. And I wanted to get prepared from both technical skills as well as business skill. And one of the good things about working for a large company is you get to work not only just technically, over time, you get an opportunity to work for non-engineering skills. And so I was lucky enough to be chosen to go do what I did in the US, to go do that in France. And then we acquired a company in Italy. So they asked me to repeat the same thing in Italy. That happened to another company noticed me, and then they asked me to move to England, and then subsequently to Singapore. all of those journeys were good because you got me out of my engineering skills, taught me how to both market product and sell, and be able to multicultural. I mean, that was a fantastic ability. So I can be proud of saying that I worked with almost 50 different countries, cultures across the world. I had teams all over the world. So it teaches you how to work with intercultural kind of engineering team or business team. Deal with diplomatically in terms of when you're part of the large company, you get exposed to a lot of other opportunities. You get to learn from that. So that was important for me when I started the company, that now I can clearly say, okay, the whole picture, I've seen it from engineering all the way to business and ultimately finance as well. So it absolutely was very beneficial, and then can relate to every part of the customer that I'm dealing with. Maybe they may be Korean, Japanese, or Europeans. I know how to work with them. I'm at ease to work with them, which I may not have been otherwise. Yeah.
The first time you and I met, you were supporting this nonprofit called Veba, and we were going back to India for a few years. And it was really nice that you came and brought a whole lot of things to give away to people. Tell us about your Vibha journey and the work you're doing in education. And I guess you're still very much involved in these kinds of educational nonprofits.
Yes, I mean, Shankar, is very much like you. Like you have dedicated many part of your life and time to doing good for others. For us, as I mentioned earlier, like we, especially Indians, we benefited tremendously from the education that we're given in our early childhood to college and so forth. None of us would be here without that. And to me, it was important that opportunities are available to lots of children, India and elsewhere, even here. That how can we help them? Because ultimately, if you can educate the masses, the rest of the problems get taken care of because they're now aware of what needs to be done, they're self-sufficient and so forth. And it'd be a crime if we don't give people that opportunity, at least the young children, that we don't. And in India, like a lot of children who go to public school, they don't get the equal education as a private school. So one other thing, and charity and Viva, what we do is try to make sure the public schools are as good as private school, so that they get the same benefit and ultimately succeed. And we have a lot of success stories that through our effort that children have benefited. And I tell to our guys internally that the genius is born everywhere, every time, everywhere. It's just that they never got the opportunity like many of the geniuses had. And you never know where we're going to get the next one until we give them the opportunity. So Viva is 100% volunteer driven. That's part of the thing that I admire the most is almost everyone is volunteering. 100% of the effort goes into supporting the kids. Now we focus primarily on primary education. And it's a lot of learning happened, not just from the interaction with other volunteers, but the kids who get the benefit of it. We all learn every single day from that. Yeah, so.
There are two things you said, and they look like they're contradictory, but I know they kind of go in tandem. One is that genius is born everywhere all the time, but it doesn't always come to the surface. It doesn't get a chance to fruition, if you will, and blossom. But you also said that you're lucky many times in your life. So how does luck and genius play together? Because there must be some way to make it work together, right?
Okay, first of all, I don't consider myself to be genius in that regard. I consider myself more lucky than that. The reality is that, look, a lot of people gave us the opportunity. The fact my parents migrated from what's Pakistan today as a refugee to India and subsequently to this country, what are the odds of that happening? You have to be blessed and you have to be lucky to have that success opportunity, right? Had that opportunity not been given to me or my family, you would have never known about Shri. We wouldn't be sitting here, sort of thing, right? Not that he's equivalent of a genius, but the luck played a big role. Yes, we had to put an effort. Somebody put an effort to put me in the right place. Somebody put an effort to educate me correctly. Somebody put an effort to give me the opportunity to go work in Europe, for example, or work in Asia, and trusted me to say, okay, this guy is a good custodian of the challenges we're giving him, that he will execute on it. All of these things are, in a way, an opportunity given to me that I had to take advantage of. So what we want to do is prepare the children that when those opportunities come, they're ready to take advantage of that. That's what we're trying to do. So it's a combination of both.
So thank you for reminding all of us about that. Tell us about your new venture, the Global Hands-On VC. What's the goal and where are you guys going with it?
As you know, I've been again fortunate enough to do 6 startups in all different capacity, from 0 to 1, as they say, and been doing it for a long time, almost every decade. Either I was part of somebody's journey or I had my own journey along the way. The last company we sold was in 2021, and it was time for me to do something different. And some of the common theme was that every startup that I've done, even the early startup that I worked for as an engineer, we had a relationship, some shape or form, with Japanese companies. Either they were customers, they were partners, or investors as well, right? And I had a similar relationship with Korea and others. But throughout all companies that I worked with, the Japanese have stood by. They actually taught you a lot. They're very quality conscious, so they make you better. They make you drive. And along the way, I came across a lot of good friends who over the years have worked together. And there was an opportunity as I sold my company, and one of my great friend Ken Yasunaga-san was just getting ready to leave the government investment fund that he was part of. He was the managing director for what's called INCJ, which is a government fund. And then Alan was just getting out of his fund as well. So 3 of us got together and saying we should be doing something. The second part was that what we are about, at the heart, all of us are hands-on. As when you do startup, and as you know, it's very hard to give up your technical skill. You always have this anxiety of saying, am I going on the wrong side of the sector? And so you always want to be engaged. So we want to be hands-on, which in the US, there are plenty of people who can help you along the way when you're doing a startup. However, in Japan, there are, but not as many as you see in the Silicon Valley. So we felt like, okay, my friend Alan has benefited a lot in Japan, so has Richard, so has Ken, and me too, personally, from all the partnerships and investment they've done. It's time that we can create some similar kind of structure for Japan startups ecosystem, where we can help them on global. So they can pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm running across this problem technically or business-wise or people-wise or team-wise. They know we've done it at least N times collectively together. They can count on, so we can help them solve side by side. So that's part of the global hands-on. The second part of the global hands-on is to help Japanese company go global. The startups tend to, even country like a smaller country like Scandinavians and Germany and Israel have produced a lot more successful startups on a global scale. Not that Japan hasn't produced successful startup, but on a global scale, relatively speaking, Japan lags compared to a lot of other countries, even though they have a lot of capital. So the idea is that how do we make sure that companies are creating, the technology they're creating, they can take companies globally. An example I give, for example, iPod, Apple, the reincarnation of Apple iPod wouldn't have happened without Toshiba's 1.8-inch drive. The battery for the Tesla cars and so forth, Panasonic would not have taken the initiative. That would not have happened. So underlying technologies are there. And now, instead of just stopping that, they want to be able to create an end product, or even making that product globally and be supplying globally. That's where we think we can help them. At the same time, on selfish reason, is that for our investors to get better return than they would get elsewhere.
Wow, exciting. I should say, arigato gozaimasu.
Thank you.
Kamsahamnida. I think you guys are doing something very interesting and very different, bringing the US and Japan together. And given the challenges we've had in the global supply chain and ecosystems, how is that likely to play out? I think the US and Japan are now getting a little closer than they were in the last few years, right?
Yeah, I mean, the geopolitical plays could come in and out. So today it's on the odds, and day after tomorrow, maybe partners together. So the idea is that one of the good thing about technology is that we continue to innovate as a human species. There's a massive opportunity ahead of us. Right? I mean, if you think that last 3 or 4 industrial revolution has given us, and we're certainly far, far better off than our forefathers were in terms of ability to do things. But we have a long ways to go. One of the challenges for our kids and our grandkids would be, don't vacation to New York City or Tokyo or any of those things. Go vacation on Mars. Go vacation on Moon. And in order to make that happen, a lot of technologies had to be invented, right? And every knowledge base we have will be challenged along the way. The things we knew that can only work this way because the law of physics tells us that way, or law of math tells us this way. But the reality is that that was because we limited of the learning of that day until we discover something new. So that is infinite opportunity from a technology point of view, right? And that's what keeps it going. I think technology will continue to play even bigger and bigger role.
One of the things that you're interested in is education, and so am I. Do you see a huge sea change coming in education, particularly for the masses and the underprivileged, those who don't have access?
Yeah, if you look at the amount of material that you and I, when we went to college, we had to go into the corner library, and that too, we couldn't even get a luxury of bus to go there and read the books, right? Today, everyone can get that. In terms of during the COVID, one other thing, as Viva and many others probably did the same, the children were not able to go to schools. How do we bring school to them, sort of thing? We had in India, one of the project we have is like construction workers. They live on the construction site. What about the kids? They can't move around school from one system. So we bring school to the children where they are, sort of thing. And the amount of information and to be able to digest, like if people would debate whether calculators should have been given to school or not. Now there's no longer a debate. Calculators would be allowed. Tomorrow there'll be a debate about whether ChatGPT should be offered to the kids to learn. And soon there'll be like a normal standard, because they had to invent a lot more things than you and I did, sort of thing. The kids, they can take for granted a lot of the stuff that we had to work manually, that is be given to them in automated fashion. So they can now figure out how do we change the trajectory of the future inventions, right? So education will be more prevalent. It will be easily accessible to every kid, barring some political restrictions. Some places will put restrictions on kids and girls and so forth. But those, I think, are temporary. Long term, it will always work out. And its cost of delivering the education is also going down.
Your optimism is infectious, and I know you're very pragmatic when you make all these statements. People come to me all the time because I work more with high school students, not able to find jobs, and with all the changes that are right in front of us, with the generative AI, large language models, there's a good chance that there'll be huge disruption in terms of what can be automated, clerical things, accounting basics, legal basics. What advice would you give to these students as they're budding, or to people in mid-career? How should people navigate through this career circus? Or where should they focus on so that they can continue to have a meaningful career?
Well, I think as you and others, we're all learning every single day. So first and foremost, try to learn every single day something different. Secondly, adapt the next technology, the next curve, and so forth. Be ready for it. Because in what we learn, that every time a new technology comes out, there's always a threat or perceived threat. But the reality is always better, right? Whether you look at steam engine to electric and so forth, or whether you look at from pre-calculator to calculator, it frees up to do something else. So if you look at it on a country level also, right? The reason we don't manufacture a lot of stuff, because the cost of human labor has gone up, and hence we need to be working on high value add. And that's a good thing ultimately, because if you are at a certain strata in terms of intellectual capacity or financial wherewithal, you should be challenging yourself to tougher problems, right? But in order to solve the tougher problems, you have to assume a lot of tools will be there. So, you can, since you worked at Intel, like the idea is that everything happens for some reason. computer revolution is going to enable, like, didn't happen without the transistor. Transistor enabled that information technology. Information technology and a massive compute and memory is going to enable us to do some biotech combination, right? Potentially a new way to escape the gravity of Earth and maybe cheaper rockets and so forth. So that, because the compute power enables us that. So without that tool of compute and processing, we'll be still doing rulers and calculating the trajectories and so forth. Would take us probably 10 times more, and we would, just an example, NASA rockets would cost you $2 billion. Now it's costing $20 million, sort of thing. Not exact numbers, but it's 100x less now, because the tool enables that, right? We didn't need the geniuses to go figure out the trajectories and so forth. Now we can use tools to project that out, right? So I think from a kid's point of view, if they have a desire to learn, that's the first and foremost. Second is to seek out those opportunities. If they're given to you or not given to you, seek out those opportunities, pay the price to learn that thing, because that's going to yield you much better reward than trying to be afraid or trying to be feeling as a threat to your job as well.
You have seen many generations of technologies. And every time I think, okay, now I think he's going to retire, you come up with something new. What have you learned over the decades, and how did you transform yourself from the early days of your career to where you are today in terms of technology or in other things? You already mentioned global cultures. And what are you continuing to learn today?
Good question, because in a way you're conflicted, right? In the Silicon Valley, there's always something next. You have to always think about what's next. At the same time, as you've done it a few times, you kind of wake up lately and say, okay, this thing comes easier for me now than it did the first time around, right? Even though, looking back, probably I couldn't do what I did the first time around now, but things to solve, to analyze, and to figure it out, to some extent, it's easier. It feels that way, at least. But at the same time, the desire that's, gosh, so much to learn, and we don't know a lot of things. If you go to today in healthcare, or it's an example of healthcare, human body definitely is evolving, but it's amazing to me we still don't know a lot of things, how it works. Whereas if you had engineered a product, you pretty much know how it works and how it's going to be solved. If something is wrong, you can troubleshoot and figure it out how to solve the problem. Dell alone would take us next 100 years to figure out how to, and then while we figure out that things will evolve, so we'll have to relearn again, sort of thing. So just constant desire, saying, wow, we don't know much, right? We don't know much. At the same time, it feels like we're getting it easier now than before.
Yes, indeed. And I'm very curious to know where you will be in 5 years, and we'll have to bring you back to see how GHOVC has made a difference and all the work you're doing with VIBA and all that. I love the fact that you're not going to stop, I don't think, anytime in the near future, and you're going to continue to inspire more people. So thank you. And anyone out there listening, we would love to hear your story, how you have seen change in your life, what kind of technologies have helped you go forward, what kind of technologies challenged you, and how we can all together make a difference. Thanks again, Shri Dodani, or should I say Shri Dodani?
Thank you, Shankar, for being there, and also thank you for all your other work you do as well, which is equally important.